Hi, and welcome to today's webinar, Sustainable IT Purchasing Trends and the Road Forward. We're very happy to have you here. I'm Cassandra Julin, Global PR and Communication Manager here at TCU Development. And with me, I have our Purchaser Engagement team who's going to talk to you today. So we have Claire Hobby, she's responsible for our global work. We have Barton Finn, responsible for Benelux and France. We have Dimitro Caputia, sorry, it's hard to pronounce your surname. He's responsible for Europe, and we have Martin Eichenheder, responsible for the German-speaking parts of Europe. Very pleased to have you here. Let me quickly also introduce TCU Certified. It's the global leading sustainability certification for IT office products and data center products. We have social and environmental criteria for the full life cycle of the products. So with 3,500 certified products, we spend also 20,000 hours every year independently verifying compliance with the criteria. If you have any questions about TCU Certified, feel free to reach out to us after the webinar. So today we're going to talk to our expert panel that I have in front of me. You have a question function where you can shoot your questions and comments, and I'll try to guide us through the day as well as possible, answering as many of the questions as we can. After this webinar, it will be recorded, so we'll send it to you in case you have to go early or you want to share it with colleagues or you have just missed some bits or want to listen in again. So that's no problem, stay tuned. So let's kick today off. First question, I think we can have a little bit of tour de table. What is the sustainability trend you're spotting right now in your market? Should we start with Martin?
Good afternoon, everybody. As Cassandra introduced so nicely, I'm responsible for the DACH region, Germany, Austria, and German-speaking Swiss market. And I started to work for TCU Certified in the middle of 2018. And I see a huge increase in interest from purchasers in the region in regards of sustainability. And we can see TCU Certified required in tenders more and more every month.
That's interesting. Is it every aspect of sustainability, or is it more focused on the social, responsible manufacturing? Is it e-waste, or where are the kind of winds blowing from what you hear?
When I started to work, I'm not a German. I'm actually born in Austria. For me, Germany was like it's one country. But now in the past years, I learned that each Bundesland, each state has a very different approach, which is also stipulated by the political situation there. So in some of the states, they want to have covered everything. In some states, they are more on the energy consumption. So it is impossible to give a general summary. It depends very much also on the climate, let's say, inside the organization, what they decide is important for them.
Barton, what would you say for your region? Is it the same, or do you have more a common trend that you see? Or, I mean, obviously you have a large region as well, so I guess it's not completely unanimous, but.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks again for everybody who joined us today. So I would say that on the general level, I would agree on the same conclusion as with Martin. Overall, I see way more interest from purchasers for applying sustainability to their IT tenders. What is interesting is that this has been limited, I think, in the recent years to public institutions. And now we see more and more the private sector starting to pay attention to these kind of questions and to start implementing some actions in order to address the impacts of their own IT infrastructure. So I think that that's a first element that I can say about my region, which if you don't remember, is France, as well as the Benelux region and the rest of the French-speaking Europe. Another dimension that I'm really excited about and that I see currently, especially for France, is the fact that I think more and more purchasers are understanding that using our devices for longer periods of time is really the best thing that we can do from an environmental and a climate perspective. And so there has been a legislation that has been recently adopted in France, in which basically requires all public purchasers to procure a minimum level of refurbished IT products, or another possibility is to also procure IT products who are made with a minimum threshold of recycled content. And I think that that's really, if I would pick one, that would definitely be the key trend that I'm seeing in my region so far, and that I'm really excited about, I must say.
Mm. Interesting. It's quite on the opposite ends of the spectrum. When Martin was saying that they look a lot of energy efficiency on one end, which most often means you're replacing products to improve energy efficiency, whilst part on your end, you're saying they're looking at actually prolonging the product life. Perhaps this is also we're understanding more of IT products, how they're made. We're looking more at a holistic approach, not just at the user phase, but perhaps thinking, okay, we know now that the major CO2 emissions are actually in the manufacturing phase. So in a circular perspective, we have to consider the IT products from a more holistic approach for it to make sense. But of course, this is a journey as well. And depending on what they have steering coming from up above, like you're mentioning as well, Martin, this obviously sets the trends on what they're going to actually be doing. Dima, what about you? Do you have some reflections from your market to start off this discussion?
Yeah, hi everyone, first of all. I would highlight at once that there is difference in maturity of all markets. And for example, I work across Europe and with some focus in particular on Eastern Europe. And I definitely see that in some markets, cost and price is still or remains as the most important and deciding factor. But still, sustainability and this demand for more sustainable products, it actually saturates the markets. I guess in connection to what Barton said, our task, for example, in Eastern Europe would be to connect cost efficiency with extended product lifetime. I guess this would help a lot to improve sustainability and like procurement practices and IT management in the region. Yeah.
That's a very good point on cost efficiency, because that also leads to the kind of conclusion that you have to have a more holistic circular approach, looking at the longer product life cycle for you to kind of those investments that they will actually pay off in the end. If you buy those more durable products, they will be able to last longer. But then at the same time, we know that it can be cheaper to procure circular as well. If you go looking at the refurbished or secondhand market,
Exactly.
you know, there are definitely solutions out there that doesn't have to cost more depending on what your needs are. Claire, welcome to the discussion with your global perspective. Is it the same in the US?
I would say we're on the way in the US, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I always enjoy listening to my European colleagues, because over your side of the pond, sustainability has been embedded for so much longer, and the ambitions are very, very clear, and they're part of the social and the business framework of the region, more so than in the US. But what's really exciting in North America, just over the last 12 to 18 months, you're probably aware that we've gone through a very large movement on the social justice front. And what's interesting from a procurement perspective is that purchasers here are getting a much stronger feeling for dealing with the social aspects of procurement. And that can mean a lot of different things. You know, typically here we've looked at things like energy efficiency once a product's on the desktop. Recycling is also something that a lot of purchasers have worked with. But now there's an understanding that we need to go deeper. We need to deal with some of the social implications of the way we manage the product life cycle, but also that a lot of those considerations start up front. And what that means is also on a very local level, people are looking at things like supplier diversity. Are we dealing with women and minority-owned businesses enough? Are we making sure that we have a positive impact in our local communities, for example? On a deeper level, what it also means is looking into the supply chain of what we buy. Right? And if we think of IT products, or if we think of apparel, if we think of vehicles or food or whatever it is, right? We're starting to get a deeper understanding of some of the biggest sustainability impacts are actually happening in the production phase. And so purchasers are starting to realize that we need to look deeper. We need to find the tools that help us do that in a good way.
That's very, and I've dug through some old materials, don't get nervous, where we talked to you beforehand. But it's actually very much coming to what you're saying again, Claire, that already a year ago you said that there was increased pressure from North America. Stuff are starting to happening over in your region and the interest is really growing. So it's great to hear that they haven't lost the interest, that is continuing, and that, you know, the momentum keeps going. Dima, what you said 12 months ago was that you were talking a lot about a growing interest in eco-labels and sustainability certifications. Do you want to comment on that? Like, how is that discussion going? Is that something that they consider when it comes to sustainable procurement of IT products, or is it something that they try to fix themselves? How are they working?
Yeah, you know, first of all, there's this global agenda and big questions on the list. I mean, climate crisis and other sustainability challenges. So whether you want or you don't want, but you still hear about those, and thanks to legislation and upcoming changes in legislation, you want to incorporate and be ready for this future when you have to be compliant with stricter requirements. And obviously, different stakeholders, different purchasers, they look for new tools. And certifications are actually a sort of these tools that help you to find the way in this sustainability niche. And definitely, purchasers find the certifications, eco-labels, and they get actually many more questions about the difference between those and how they're interconnected, and whether compliance with one eco-label or certification automatically means that you're compliant with other certifications. But maybe this is something to discuss later.
But I think it's a good point you're making,
yeah.
Dima, and I think we should actually spin off on that a little bit, because how do you differentiate between a good sustainability certification or eco-label compared to those that are perhaps more closer to the greenwash end of the spectrum, if you are to take far and right end, and not necessarily to you, Dima. I don't know if someone else wants to jump on that, but I think it's a really important point to make.
I can maybe grab that. Oh, sorry, Dima.
All right, yeah, you can continue there.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, isn't that the $60,000 question, right? I mean, we hear this. I know I can probably speak for all my colleagues here that this is a question we get a lot. You know, there's eco-label overload out there. There's so much to choose from, and I think there's eco-labels are known for making a lot of broad and ambitious claims. But what I think people are realizing is it comes down to verification. And we get a lot of purchasers saying, yeah, independent third-party verification is really important to the credibility of our process and what we're able to report. But what does that actually look like? And that's sometimes I feel, I don't know what the rest of us think, but I feel that's where the knowledge is challenged. That's kind of where the conversation stops. What does verification actually look like in practice, right? So it's a really important topic to explore further and really help procurement teams understand what to ask and what to look for.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think as far as I'm concerned and from what I see, we were speaking of trends, and I think that one of the key trends is that I see more expertise being developed within purchasers when it comes to knowing what is a good criterion, how to draft good criteria to make sure that they really have drive potential progress from the IT industry. But on the other hand, verification is often overlooked. And from my perspective, usually when I discuss this with purchasers, I mention that this is equally important, because at the end of the day, no matter how ambitious the criteria that you've chosen can be, if you don't ensure that the products that are being delivered are in actual compliance with those, then they become kind of pointless. So I think that that's if I had a recommendation to do or to give to the purchasing community, that would be one of the key points I would raise, to focus and also to build some expertise when it comes to the verification part, which is really important.
Mm.
Yeah, maybe I
Agree
would add
fully.
to it. Yeah.
Go
Maybe I
ahead,
would add
Adima.
to what Barton said. Basically, as sustainability itself as a concept, it's not really a stable thing. Same with compliance of products and services. So you definitely need follow-ups on this compliance, because today it is, but tomorrow, who knows? And now I'm talking about factories and other things related to certified products. But yes, I also understand that for many people it's confusing nowadays, because if you open this portal called Ecolabel Index, you will probably find 500 plus certifications and eco-labels. So it's really important to understand the essence of these tools and how they work, and actually choose the right tool in terms of scope. But again, verification remains an important aspect, and
Definitely
post-verification.
We get the questions rolling in there, so that's great. Keep them coming. I'm going to jump a little bit topic here. Maybe we'll come back to verification in other parts of the discussion. But he's interested in the reuse market and the refurbished market. Is it a lot of demand for this? What are the discussions going on right now there? I know I've heard a lot about, what about the warranty when it comes to refurbished and remanufactured products, but it seems like that's not a problem anymore. What are you hearing from, and what's going on there? Someone want to jump on that, or is it not really there yet in your markets? Maybe that's the answer.
I would say it's actually quite a new niche. New business models actually appear in this niche, and it's still very new for everyone. But we could see, and especially in Sweden and Scandinavia, rise of the companies that actually work with this market. The companies that create this added value and refurbish products and create this new market. And it grows really fast. So I guess we can expect that during upcoming years, more and more buyers will accept actually this new approach. As for now, I guess many people have concerns and they're afraid of buying, like something refurbished and something what has been in use. But I guess it's about changing consumption habits and user behavior. So it's about educating and explaining that it's not a big deal, and refurbished can be as good as actually a brand new product. I guess it counts, but it's still new for many markets.
Yeah, what I heard from the refurbished companies as well is that their problem is not the demand. I mean, the demand is out there for them. Procurers are really after these products, but the problem is that we keep storing our old products in our drawers. We're afraid to give it away, or even that we treat it as e-waste, even though all of these valuable resources could still be used by another person, but that may not be you. So one of the key problems is that we're not handing stuff in the correct manner. Why do we think that is, Claire?
I
jumped on this.
Yeah, no, I just think this is a really exciting topic. I mean, I think this is kind of a new frontier for how we even use technology, right? I think this is one of the most exciting spaces to start looking at if you think about sustainable IT. And in my experience, it's across the board. Yes, there is demand in pockets of Europe, particularly in pockets of the Americas, for example, and yet we have other examples. I was talking to a company last week, right? And we learned that the big hyperscalers, these enormous data centers, right? They are replacing their server hardware literally every 3 years. These products are designed to function fully for 10. And if you just think about that fact alone, right?
It's
we
scary.
need to change. We need to change the equation, but it's going to take active engagement at all points of the business model, right? So we as procurers need to step up, and I want to point to Barton's point of asking for a minimum of recycled or refurbished products as part of your tender. That's really powerful because you're sending a signal to industry that refurb is a viable option. And just finally, I wanted to make another point that you talked about holding on to devices, Cassandra. I think that's a really interesting point because I think we're buyers and sellers and refurbishers are kind of trying to figure out where's the sweet spot here, because the products do contain embedded value. They can be resold, they can be refurbished, but how, where is the use sweet spot? How long do you hold on to it? When is it time to pass it on? And I think we're still kind of figuring that out in a way that makes business sense to all parties in that equation. So it's an incredibly exciting space to be in.
Yeah, and maybe I can just jump in there because I think that it's important to promote and to talk about use of secondhand products and everything. But one thing that I'm still a bit concerned of, and especially for organization, not for individual customers or users, but it's the fact that repairs and upgrades are just not mainstream yet in organizations. And I think that that's where we should all start before thinking of buying secondhand products. As Claire mentioned, and I think it's the case for every one of us, we're often talking to organizations where they tell us, well, we renew our IT infrastructure or IT equipment every 4 years, no matter what happens, no matter. And I think that that's a bit silly, if I can say this like this, because yeah, at the end of the day, these devices they can perfectly continue to satisfy the users of those organizations. So really, I think that we also need to break down a bit the myth of we need to change products like regularly, which is not really the case, and we can continue to keep in use the ones that we already have. So yeah, I think that's also important.
Yeah,
I'm
We had a
wondering,
good comment on that
Cassandra.
coming in as well. Basically saying that, it's one thing awarding, good labels and making good tenders put in place, but it's actually how you treat the whole framework contract, like the whole duration period. That's actually what matters and what's going to make the real difference in procurement. So that's very good input from our audience here.
And Cassandra, if you don't mind, just maybe a short comment about the products that we keep actually at home. Sort of my speculation, but I guess here we could divide actually users in two groups, like professionals and individual users. And then speaking of individual users, it comes to the data stored on these devices that they don't want to use anymore. And if you talk about professional sector, it's all about safety. And these two aspects, they actually make people keep devices somewhere, like on the shelves at home. But again, as Claire mentioned, technology and progress, and in particular cloud-based solutions, they will actually promote leasing and maybe not keeping these devices like at home or like in offices. So I guess this time this question will be solved and we will not accumulate that many devices in the garage.
Could I just,
Martin, what about your market? I'm curious to hear when you heard your colleagues speak. Do you see the same trends going on in your markets with the refurbishment, with the data center movement? Like, what do you hear from your contacts?
I think here we have to clearly distinguish between, let's say, small and medium-sized organizations or private individuals.
Yeah.
I bought 2 second-hand tablets and 3 second-hand mobile phones myself, but that's because I maintain them myself. But if you look at large organizations with several hundreds and thousand workplaces, I would say the situation at the moment is that they are not buying a hardware, they are buying a tool for their employees to do their job.
Yeah.
And the refurbished products are okay if they are sure that these products are maintained. It's not just the hardware, it's also the firmware, it's the operating system which need to run. and client-specific applications, SAP, for example, just one, which need to be able to run on this hardware. So I think on the large size organizations, as Dima mentioned, to rent the hardware is probably a more likely option than to buy refurbished. But for small organizations which don't have these issues, and for private individuals especially, I think buying refurbished hardware like Rebuy or AFB in the German market is a very smart and favorable way to go and support the circularity.
So today's webinar is part of EU Green Week, where the theme is towards zero pollution ambition for air, water and soil. So pollution is obviously a big problem when it comes to IT products and procurement, and it's not just in the product itself, like when it comes to e-waste, it's also, you know, in the manufacturing phase, the chemicals used and all of these add-ons that are attached to IT products. How is that considered in purchasing right now? Is it considered, or are they kind of focusing on what they can change right here, right now in front of them?
Maybe
I'm asking tricky questions, I know.
I know, these are the good ones. I would say it's incredibly important, right? These are very risky problems, both from the worker impact, community impact side, but they're also incredibly difficult for purchasers to feel like they're having a direct impact on. And to be honest, this is one reason why we do the work we do as part of TCU Certified. We are kind of in between the voice of purchasing and directly impacting industry. So that's why we set criteria around finding safer chemicals, not completely safe chemicals yet, but really assessing those chemicals, impacting what's happening on the environmental side in production. And I think, you know, when purchasers use TCU Certified, for example, they can feel secure that some of those questions are actually being handled, and not only handled, they're being followed up on directly on the factory floor, which is very reassuring. But I just wanted to follow up on a really quick comment about leasing that came up earlier that's kind of connected to this. If a lease is just a financial construct, right? And when you think about a lease, if you have a lease for every 3 years or something, you're still switching out that product every 3 years. And if we look at what's happening in manufacturing, if it's pollution or worker impact or what have you, we're still manufacturing a new product every 3 years. So you can get a replacement product in your lease. Now, leasing can be good because, you know, it means the manufacturer or the brand is retaining control of that product. So it can be good, but I think we still want to ask those tricky questions, and pollution, chemicals are definitely part of that conversation.
And do you hear that conversation from the procurement experts that you meet, or is that a conversation that you bring to the table when you go there? I'm sorry, I'm hired to ask the tricky questions.
I definitely hear it. I definitely hear it. And there's you know, there's some initiatives out there, some multi-stakeholder initiatives out there to try and deal with this, not just product chemicals, but what we call process chemicals, right? What are workers exposed to in the factory when they're assembling these products and ready to ship them out to you? So there's some initiatives going on, but yeah, I get the question because people don't quite know, well, how can I possibly address this in procurement, right? What can I actually do? But I'd love to hear from my EU colleagues if they hear the same.
Yeah, maybe I could continue. And actually, you know, I would answer this question from a different angle, because I promise you that on daily basis, purchasers maybe don't go into these depths, into details, like what kind of substances they use in production and to what extent and how they affect environments. Because from one side, there is legislation that actually tries to incorporate and push this more sustainable approach. And from another side might be or is a commitment shown by purchaser. And here we come to the very idea of TCU Certified or other certifications actually exist, because they create this connection between legislation and commitment. And this actually allows purchaser maybe not go, or like if no time for this and resources, not to deep dive into details. I guess this is really important angle.
And following that also on legislation and other incentives that is going on, Barton, do you think it helps? I mean, on a European level, there's been loads going on. It's been the EU Green Deal, the right to repair. There's been so many initiatives like pushing for more circular approach to products in general and to procurement in general. Do you think it helps, or is it like talk clubs, or where do we go from there? Like, can the purchasers actually take this and make something concrete out of it? What's your analysis there?
It's a good question, and I think so far, and so far means over the last 10 years or so, the approach that has been promoted has been the voluntary approach. So we've had a lot of voluntary tools that have been developed. Maybe people in the audience knows about the EU GPP criteria, those kind of voluntary tools that have been developed in order for purchasers to voluntarily integrate in their tenders. And I think that now the fact, and personally, and that's my personal view, but I agree with that. I think that now policymakers and governments, at least at EU level, have understand that the voluntary approach works for some parts, but that more mandatory requirements should also be introduced. Because if you look at what is happening in steel today, we're not there, and we're not where we should be in terms of sustainability inclusion in tenders. And I mean, I'm sure it could be the same, but I'm reviewing a lot of tenders that are coming from the region that I'm covering, and still inclusion of sustainability in those tenders remains exceptional, or at least it's not the rule yet. So I think yes, mandatory legislations is something that is needed in order to really give this extra nudge, so that the entire procurement community really take ownership of that topic. I'm not saying that that some procurers are not implementing already ambitious practices. It's the case, but if you look at the majority of the purchasing community, I think yes, it's a more mandatory approach is needed in order to really get to somewhere.
Yeah, bright example.
I would like to.
Martin, or yeah, sorry, Martin. Just
yeah, Martin, go ahead first.
I would like to add something. I think nowadays it is as easy as it never was before to buy sustainable IT products. Just we ourselves have 3,600 products at the moment from different product categories, and it's reliable. It's very well evaluated by several independent organizations, Siegel, Klarheit, and whatever you have. And so it's quite easy, but what is needed is a commitment from politicians on one side, and on the other side from each purchasing organization to go this way. It's not difficult, and it's not really limiting the competition or the offers you get in the professional purchasing business. But it needs people to become active, and this is something I think they need to decide themselves. So when I talk to purchaser, my first question is, what do you want to achieve, with how much effort and how much certainty to achieve what you plan to achieve. And then it's quite easy to suggest the solution, or the solution to achieve that becomes visible very, very fast. Yeah. But legislation.
And I have a question. Sorry.
Yeah, but even if you refer to the new German Lieferkettengesetz, supply chain responsibility law, it's good. It's very good to have that, to have a start, but it doesn't cover everything so well as it could be. So it's a start, and it's a process that we are going, and it's a personal commitment, I would say, is the most important thing.
We have a comment here, I think, or a call out from a person in the audience, which I think is highly relevant. And what you're saying, it depends what the needs are. And he's kind of asking, you know, price versus sustainability, and kind of where do we find all of these success examples, and where do we find the good stories where tenders with sustainability criteria has actually rated higher than price, which normally is, you know, the ruling criteria in tenders. And my general comment on this from talking to you guys, and then I'll let you guys reflect, but that's really that, you know, the success stories, especially from the public procurement, is that their hands are tied to talk about it afterwards. They do actually a lot of good stuff, but they can't really talk about it because they can't be seen to favoring one thing over another. Or is that a fair analysis, or am I am I out on deep waters here? I mean, obviously you guys are the experts.
I can maybe start that conversation. I think actually purchasers are getting better at reporting out what their sustainability policies have resulted in. I think we could use more verification behind some of that data that's being reported. I think too high a percentage of that data is based on self-declarations and unverified data. So that's another puzzle that we need to start looking into, again, pointing to that independent verification piece. But I think there's a willingness to find a way to measure this. I really do. Others in
Are
the
we
team.
too early in the process? Are we like in the startup phase of sustainable procurement, even though some people may be saying we've done this for 15 years? Are we still early?
Yes.
In the fact that we can't show what we're doing, we can't really talk about it in the right sense. I mean, quite often I think we end up in greenwash, not out of bad intent, but because, you know, it's just an area that we're not comfortable and used to communicating about. So we end up in the wrong type of discussions, and it actually ends up worse than beneficial for us.
But I think, Cassandra, I think this points to sustainable procurement in general, not just about IT products. I think purchasers are still trying to figure out, okay, how do we measure this? How do we, you know, do we feed into rating systems or ranking systems? This is an enormous question that procurement around the world is grappling with right now. So I think it's definitely a work in progress, but another aspect to that I think is, you know, it's one thing to report on energy consumption. You know, a lot of purchasers are starting to look at scope 3 emissions, for example, or using tools like SciMap to measure carbon. But social, you know, how do we measure what's going on in the supply chain, right? That's really hard for purchasers to see and to quantify. So I think that's maybe our next frontier, to figure out how can we quantify and get measurement and help purchasers put that out into their reporting.
Are you having good dialogues around these topics right now? Or is that something you want to call out perhaps to start?
No, at least from my perspective, I think, yes, I'm having really good discussions with purchasers from my region on that. And to answer to your first question, yes, maybe we are still in the early days, but I think that at least now purchasers really understand the complexity between all of these issues. So and I think that the understanding part is really what was needed in order to be able to move forward. So I'm talking now to purchasers with way more knowledge about either the environmental or the social issues. So that's a positive development, I would say, on that front. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Germany. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Sorry for interrupting you. I would also say that there are not many networks of purchasers, you know, like-minded purchasers that actually pursue sustainability. And for instance, recently Martin and I had joint meetings between purchasers from different regions, different markets. And we had really productive meetings when they exchanged experience and literally templates, how to use sustainability certification in contracts, what kind of language to use. And that's actually what we can help with. I mean, we can connect you, because as I understand the question in the chat was about cases and where to find information about cases. So we can connect you actually with these networks and these purchasers. And maybe Cassandra, you could also mention our report where we highlight some particular stakeholders that implement this kind of practices.
Definitely, we have a lot of cases on our website, but you know, I find working in a communications department is still quite hard to grasp because there is such a sensitivity around speaking about procurement, and there is, you know, you also, especially public procurement, you have the sensibility. If you're in the process, your hands are very tied in terms of what you can do and what you can say. After you've implemented it, I mean, you're normally very proud of the work that you've done, but you're still at the risk of being criticized for a lot of things or having it appealed. So I still feel like even though we have all of these legislative incentives and, you know, there is all of this stuff going on, there is the momentum and people are doing good things, it's still hard to get people to talk about it and be proud of the great work that they do.
Yeah. Maybe I could just jump in there, because I think if you look at the procurement profession and the job that they have, a lot of this is about risk. Right?
Yeah.
How do we reduce risk? And then if we take that to measuring sustainability, we can measure our energy consumption. How much have we reduced our energy consumption? And I can convert that into euros or to dollars. That's a very quantifiable metric. But now if we're moving to sustainability, well, there's all these less, opaque, less transparent issues. How do we measure it? How do we see it? How do we know what improvement means? So I want to offer some words of encouragement that I heard about a year ago, and I keep it on my wall here. And I tell purchasers this all the time. When you want to attack sustainability as a whole, don't expect a clean supply chain to start with, and don't expect overnight improvement. What you're doing is you're actually making a long-term commitment, and you're signaling to industry that they need to make this long-term commitment as well. So doing something matters, and it doesn't matter if it's small, but what you're doing is you've stated, we're going to pursue this over time. So I think I would encourage purchasers not to be so hung up on risk, but find the bravery, find the starting point, because it matters. So
The
don't be afraid.
lighthouse cases, right?
Yeah.
The
Find
ones
your
that
friends.
are
They're out there.
very encouraging words, Claire. So I want to have some fun as well. Just a question that is quite general, but what's the most common question you get asked out there when you talk to purchasers? It could be anything, high and low. Let's start with you, Barton.
Yeah, so there are a lot, but one that I really like is I often get purchasers coming to me and asking, okay, I would like to use TCU Certified as an award criteria for my whatever IT I will be buying. So how much, what's the percentage I should be giving to this? Is it 10? Is it 20? Is it 30%? So and my answer is always the same. It depends. It depends on the context of your organization. Of course, the higher the better until a certain level. But that's one of the key questions I get. How big of a weight I should be giving to TCO certified or sustainability dimension as part of the award process.
And those are purchasers assuming they already include sustainability criteria. So they have actually come quite far in terms of the work that they're doing.
Yes, and that's also why they're asking, because they're scared to be a bit too much asking, or yeah.
That's great. Martin, what about for the German-speaking region? What's the most common question?
I was trying to answer that when you asked but there is not a single one. Every time I have talked to purchasers, they surprise me with new questions, and I can't say it. There was a time where legal aspects were very common to be asked, and now it's about credibility, verification more. So it really depends, and then how many products are we going to get enough response to our tenders? Are we going enough tender? Something like that. But it's not a single one. Sorry.
There's something I know that you and I have talked about before. It was quite a while ago, but it seems like it comes up here and there. Is what if you buy a certified product and then you have it refurbished? Is it still certified? Can we still is the contract still valid? Right? That's a tricky one that you had to deal with.
Yes, actually, though, it also came up yesterday, like Dima mentioned before. Yesterday, we also hosted purchaser exchange between Austrian Federal Purchasing and Swiss Eidgenössische Exchange. You know, it's very good when purchasers talk to each other, in my opinion. And refurbishing was also an issue. Yes, and I hope that very soon we can also offer certified refurbished product to give the buyer of refurbished products also the assurance to buy something still sustainable, even if it was refurbished. But that may be a project of next year.
Who knows? We like projects, but that's you know, it's high and low. I understand when it comes to your discussions, and you never know what's going to pop up. What about you, Dima?
Usually when we have a conversation, it means that this purchaser already shows commitment and intends to use TCU Certified. So it usually comes to practical questions about contract language, how to integrate TCU Certified in contracts.
But is that a problem, Dima? I'm thinking if they come to you when they're already very far advanced in the procurement process, would you like them to come actually earlier? Can you help them more if they reach out earlier in the process? What's your thinking around that?
It depends. I mean, you know, nowadays it's so easy to get all required information that you need. And from my experience, some of purchasers, they find everything they need on our website. And then at some points they just get back to highlight that, yes, we use TCU Certified and maybe to clarify some details. So it's really about background of this purchaser, commitment, and for how long they've been doing this. But usually, as I said, it comes to practical questions like availability of certified models on the market, contract language, and actually the difference between different certifications. Why to use this as certified and not anything else? Yeah.
And here again, we've touched a little bit upon it, like what's a good sustainability certification? When do we end up in simple greenwash? You know, how do we know what claims are true and those that aren't? And I'm going to throw out a little teaser right now that this is something that we are going to be talking about in our next webinar when we launch our next Impacts and Insights report. It's exactly this that we're talking about, how to navigate the kind of jungle out there and what makes a good sustainability certification. But not to jump on that too much, Claire, I want to give you also the chance to answer my question. What are people saying in your region?
Kind of like Martin, they're saying everything, which is great. That means there's a fantastic conversation going on. But let me take a little bit of a global approach to that question. One question we get a lot, particularly in Asia and in the Americas, is what do I do with my e-waste? What do I do with my used products, right? We have a whole room full of old computers or monitors or what have you. And of course, if you can't use them anymore, recycling is an option. But that's a really good conversation for us to have, because landing with a room full of used products that you don't know what to do with, that conversation needs to start in procurement, right? You need to be talking to your suppliers about, our plan is to use these products for a minimum of 6 years, let's say, and then plan for what you're going to do with them at the end of that contract period. So it's a really good question to start with. You know, what do we do with all this stuff? And it's a really great opportunity for us to have that broader conversation about what can you do in procurement, what's the impact you can have both on your internal use cycle, but also on how industry delivers those products to you. It's a very important signaling process to industry. So yeah, it's a good question.
Definitely. I mean, e-waste is something that always pops up when we speak about IT products and the sustainability. I mean, it's there, and I think some regions are more affected than others, also due to that it ends up there, you know, it's in their backyard. So then it's definitely a big topic. And that was actually our last report, one of the coverage that we had there, you know, the circular management of an IT product, the kind of holistic approach to them and what you can do with it. So if you're interested in those 33 tips that we ended up with for a more circular management of IT products, they're in our Impacts and Insights report on our website. So check that out. We have a couple of minutes left, so let's leave that looking forward a little bit now. So looking into the future, where do you see the big discussions going? Like, what do you expect you'll spend your time on solving or talking about in the coming year? Should we start with you, Claire?
Oh gosh, I was hoping I'd be last. You caught me off guard. I really think the supply chain conversation is people are really understanding that that's where we need to dig more. If you've got 80% of the life cycle emissions in production, we need to impact that. Worker impact is still a huge question. So I think that's one thing. Also, I think verification, it just keeps coming back. What does it mean? How can I reduce risk? If we can reassure purchasers that verification helps them feel confident about what they're doing, then we're going to have more purchasers taking those first steps. So I think those two topics are things I see us doing more work in.
Martin, what about you?
I would say, from the criteria side, I think TCU Certified, for example, is covering all aspects of a sustainable IT product. So I think what the focus will be is on verification, on trust, what you as a purchaser expect to become when you ask for it in your tender, that this is not a self-declaration signed by sales or a person somewhere far away, unknown, not possible to reach, no responsibility, but to get the assurance that what for you as a purchaser is important to achieve is also is it going to happen. I think this is going to be the main issue, and the greenwashing is a big problem in my opinion. The more sustainability is becoming a topic, the more greenwashing we are going to expect.
Yeah. Dima, what about you?
Yeah, I think that we can expect a shift in approaches and understanding itself, from why to buy more sustainable to how to buy more sustainable. And I also think that those markets that are behind right now in terms of maturity, they will actually reach same level as more advanced markets now. So we can definitely expect a greater demand for more sustainable products. And then, as always, it comes to legislation, to this global agenda, to the issues on this agenda, and these global trends that actually push and accelerate different approaches. So that's my opinion.
And for you, Barton, where's your conversation going?
Yeah, it's difficult because the others didn't left a lot for me to pick. But I would say two things. First of all, traceability. I think that's a growing topic. I hear more and more purchasers, but also our willingness to be able to dive deeper into being able to try to link materials to product and then product to users and everything. And I think that from a circularity perspective, this is also something that will be really important. Also from a responsible mineral sourcing perspective. So I think that traceability will definitely be one of the key aspects we will be even more talking in the future. And then secondly, I think the CO2 footprint and the CO2 impact of products, being able to really tie this to a number in a credible way is another topic that is definitely here to stay, because from what I see, organizations really want to be able to quantify their impact in order to measure how much improvements and benefits they have helped contribute over time. So I think that, yeah, definitely CO2 emissions and the CO2 footprint of products will be also another topic that is definitely here to stay.
So you are all of you, going to have a lot of fun work ahead of you in the years to come, it sounds like. We haven't been able to answer all of the questions, so some of these we are going to reach out to you directly to try to give you the answer that you need. We got a comment in at the end here also asking why remanufacturing has not been discussed, but I think it's kind of included in the holistic discussion, so we can have more discussions about that if you'd like, but for the time's sakes now we're not going to have time to address it specifically, but I think it's in there. So huge thanks to our panel that has joined us today. Huge thanks to all of our listeners. This webinar will be available, as mentioned, on demand in about a week's time. If you have any questions, we have our global purchaser engagement team that is here to help you. You met Martin, Claire, Dima, and Bartom, but we also have our colleague Annika covering the Nordic region and Nick covering the Asia region. So we're covering, I would say, all the markets. If you have any questions or are insecure, go onto our website and you'll find all of our contact details there. As mentioned, our next webinar is the launch of our next Impacts and Insights report that is going to deep dive into the topic greenwash and what makes a good sustainability certification. So I hope you're not going to be missing out on that. So with that said, I wish you all a great morning, evening, or wherever you are in the world. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks, Cassandra,
Cassandra.
and everyone
Bye.
who joined.